Hey everybody! I guess it's time for a proper introduction since somehow I failed to do that in the first two videos. My name's Shauna, but if you know me online, you probably know me better as WhiskeyChick. Let's go ahead and get a few things out of the way right up front. I know that there are other people who go by the name WhiskeyChick. However, I'm pretty sure I was there first. So why do I use the name WhiskeyChick? Well, back in 2002, when we drew up the plans for the first country music website in our portfolio, the name of it was Drunken Hillbilly. And I still had a corporate job, and I was also going through some custody issues at the time, and I felt like I maybe didn't want to have my real name attached to a site named Drunken Hillbilly while I was dealing with all those things. With the corporate job, I was actually the face of a pretty large hotel brand, and I didn't want to disparage the brand, and I also didn't want to ruin anything for my future career chances by talking openly online about going to shows at bars, buying bands a round of drinks, and talking about the live music scene and the touring circuit and the behavior that happens on those. I felt like the two worlds would never ever match up, so I just went under WhiskeyChick, and I've been that way ever since. There have been times where the WhiskeyChick persona has blocked me from getting a job that I might have been interested in, but on the whole, I've managed to go now over a decade without a corporate job other than the occasional contract gig. And I've been able to pay the mortgage, I've been able to pay, all my utilities. I've been able to live a fairly comfortable life in the Midwest and still get to be WhiskeyChick. So what is my WhiskeyChick brand? Well, only recently people start calling it a brand. WhiskeyChick was just the name I used when I went out because it was more memorable than Shauna Castorena. Hell, most people can't say Shauna Castorena, but at least not without tripping over it. But WhiskeyChick, totally memorable. I even pulled the real estate trick where I had my picture on the back of my business cards because I knew when I was meeting bands, talking to them about what they were doing, maybe getting interview audio or taking pictures, they weren't going to remember me from one town to the next. So I'd give them a business card and a round of whiskey. That way they attach the two together, and boom, I can follow a band's career from beginning to current. And they still remember my first time at one of their shows. And I feel like that was an important thing to do back when nobody was doing social media. So what all do I do? What I do is I run a couple blogs. For me, blogging has been a way to share my passion for music. I have been blogging about country music since 2004. A couple years ago, we started a rock and roll blog as well. That's not doing as well as I had hoped, but unfortunately, that's the nature of things when you start splitting your attention between genres. In country music, there seems to be a bit of a delay in adopting technology. So when I started blogging, country fans weren't really comfortable getting their information online. They were still relying on print magazines, and they were relying on shows or channels like CMT and GAC. Those channels weren't trusting the power of the internet. They were using the internet as a landing page to redirect people to their print magazines and television channels. I was one of the few people out there who was taking headlines and publishing them online for people to read. I was way ahead of the game at the time, but over time the country music fan base would catch up to me, and that was great. I got to watch an entire genre of music adopt technology. But at the same time, we're still a little bit behind when it comes to, say, this video, YouTube. Country music fans are just now getting to the point where they realize YouTube is for more than video gamers and music videos. They're finding out that there's news content, there's interviews, there's festival recaps, there's live broadcasts from festivals that they only wish they could go to. There's live broadcasts from concerts and backstage, and all of these things can be found here on YouTube and on our blogs. And it's amazing to be able to blow people's minds by what they have at their fingertips that they could only dream of 10 years ago. I got into blogging because a very good friend of mine, he was a web developer and graphic designer, and one night hanging out with a bunch of our friends, we were joking around about a punk message board that we were all members of out in Arizona called azpunk.com. It's long since dead, but we were joking around about how we like going to those shows. But some of these guys, they're from the Midwest, and they kind of missed that country music scene and wanted to give a lot more attention online to underground country artists that were not mainstream, that could use a little more attention. And so they goofed around, and in the course of one hack night, they put together a very basic message board. And we used that message board. That was Drunken Hillbilly. We used that message board for almost a year to just pass messages back and forth between like 10 of us. It really never got any traction as it was, and over time the guy's interest in it faded. Well, you don't leave tools sitting around and not expect me to eventually say, "Oh, are you using that? Let me take it from you." So, with their blessing, I took over drunkenhillbilly.com, and I started publishing my own news. I started teaching myself HTML. I started teaching myself at the time .NET Nuke, which we were using, and then after that we got into, PHP and then WordPress, and everything that I've done so far has been self-taught. I am so grateful for all the resources on the internet that have helped me learn along the way. And sometimes I kind of wish I went to school for this, but also I'm very glad that I didn't, because my head's not filled with a bunch of fluff I didn't need, and it's gotten me to where I am now. Over time, Drunken Hillbilly kind of became something that wasn't really going to serve the purpose we set out to serve. We wanted to get a bigger audience for underground musicians, but the problem with an underground musician is if nobody knows they exist, they're never going to look for them. And people on the regular don't go searching for underground country music. Like, that's not a search term that people look for. We started talking about mainstream artists on the underground site and realized that people were starting to search for that. And by accident, we're finding the underground artists. So we realized that it was important for us to, as much as we thought that the mainstream artists didn't need the coverage of a tiny little nobody blog, we started giving those mainstream artists coverage in order to get traffic to our underground artists. Well, as things evolve over time, the mainstream site took off. It was doing fantastic. We were getting partnerships, we were getting sponsors, we were getting direct ad buys, we were getting interview opportunities, we were getting live show passes, we were, the publicists recognized the value of blogs long before the fans did. And those publicists were being very accommodating to us. But at the same time, the content on Drunken Hillbilly and even the name Drunken Hillbilly made those publicists gun shy, and we had to create a separate platform for the mainstream artists that wouldn't turn away the publicists. And so Country Music News Blog was born. Country Music News Blog is now celebrating its 15th year. That is 15 years of me slugging away, sharing headlines, interviewing artists. I had a staff at one point who I could send all over the country to cover festivals, to cover award shows, to cover CMA Fest. I have attended some great summits. I've attended some great conferences. I've represented the entire blogging community at several of those. I've done tech conferences and podcamps. I've done a whole lot of public appearances that hopefully bring a more professional light to the blogging community. The stigma of it being bored housewives died about a decade ago, right along with my corporate job. After only 5 years of blogging, which seems like a long time now, but realize blogging was brand new when I started. Nobody did that for a living. Nobody made an income off of blogging when I started. After 5 years of blogging between the two sites, I was able to leave the corporate world and pursue this passion full time. I also had small children at the time. They are nearly grown now, but because of those small children, I didn't go out and get to show my face very much, which brings us to why we're doing this channel. My kids are grown. My older boy turns 18 in June, and my twins turn 16 in August. And they're now at a point where I can go to festivals on a regular basis. I can go to live shows on a regular basis. And I'm not worried about hiring a sitter or leaving the kids at home or anything like that. It opens up the ability to travel, which is something that I'd really like to do more of. It also opens up my ability to work more hands-on with bands, which I've dabbled in the past. If you're familiar with any of my work, you know that I did a lot of the marketing and management for the Southern rock band Motor Train. I learned so much. And it's not surprising that going from blogging about music to working with bands came so naturally. I had been getting, press release after press release, after album review, after live show review for a decade by the time Motor Train came into my life. And it was really easy to see when you have that many, basically, case studies. It was really easy to see where most bands were going wrong and where some bands were really getting it right. So I started working with one. And from there, I took that experience and then turned it around and used it to make the blogs better. I learned how to better pair mainstream artists and successful artist coverage with up-and-comers who would benefit from being showcased side by side. I learned how to give really, really valuable feedback to artists that before we're just getting very vanilla, run-of-the-mill reviews by other blogs, and I could turn around and tell them, this is something that you could change and improve your reach. I went from helping Motor Train to helping many, many bands, and mostly with their marketing efforts and a little bit with reviewing their music. But over time, it just became a natural thing. Bands would reach out to me after meeting me at a festival or meeting me at a show or even seeing my work online, and I would start helping them improve their game. And I think that's what I like the best about the work that I do with the blog and with social media marketing and with band consultation, is it gives me the freedom to switch between these different roles and wear all of these hats. So the job never gets boring. It does make me a little more cautious about taking on too many projects at once, because that time is valuable, and anytime I'm giving to a band, I could be earning income with my blogs. Things I don't like about blogging, I'll be honest, it is a full-time job. Anybody that tells you passive income through a blog is a possibility really has never done it. Or they're using get-rich-quick spam techniques that are not sustainable in the long run. If you want to make a full-time living on a blog, you have to work it as a full-time job, 8 to 10 hours a day, constantly scooping your colleagues, constantly working with your colleagues and getting collaborations in place. Always looking for a new angle to get more eyeballs on the information that you're sharing. Always looking for a new angle to present the artists in a way that fans haven't seen before. It is a hustle, and it's not a side hustle. It's not a spare time thing. The people who are making a living at this, they're not doing this after their 9 to 5. The people who are doing this after their 9 to 5 certainly aren't making a living with it, otherwise they'd be able to quit their jobs. And I think that really speaks to a lot of the downsides, is once you leave that 9 to 5, you're in it alone. You may have other people who blog that you talk to, and you may have a supportive family or, friends who are like, oh, that's so cool. But they don't understand what you're doing. You're having to do everything: the administration, the content creation, the graphics, the web design, the marketing, the correspondence between yourself and the artists or publicists or other outlets that you're working with. You're having to do your own advertising sales. You're having to do everything you can think of that would go into making a whole magazine work. You're having to do that by yourself because it's just you and your blog. If you're lucky and you have a staff like I had for a while, then you can delegate a lot of that. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to you and your vision and your passion. And sometimes that can be discouraging, because when you're down and when you're stuck and when you're feeling like every day is the same and you're not making any headway, or when your traffic numbers drop or your advertising dollars, bottom out, who's going to give you your pep talk and who's going to tell you you're still doing great? Because the only person around is the mirror. So that's one of the downsides to blogging. And I think that's one of the things that's led me to vlogging, is that in blogging, you can get thousands and thousands of people visiting your site every day, but you rarely ever get comments unless it's somebody who's enraged by something you said. So the majority of feedback that you get is negative, and you're still invisible. You are this invisible island that produces words. And with vlogging, you're suddenly a face and a voice. And I think that's what is drawing me in to try this finally. So what's next? This is it. I'm going to start talking to you about the work I do, and I'm also going to show you what it's like to be a full-time solopreneur, I guess we're calling it these days. I'm not even sure if I pronounce that right. It's funny how you can start working in an industry and find out that the industry has been built while you were busy working. They create words for the things you've been doing the whole time. You don't know those words exist. When you finally pop your head out of the sand and start talking to other people who just started in the industry, they will talk circles around you in jargon and not know how to click a button. So I think that's one of the other frustrating things about being in this for as long as I have. A decade and a half is a long time in any industry, but especially in an industry that was brand new when you started. It's like working a gold mine with a pickaxe, and you stay down in that mine so long that by the time you pop your head up, you find out everybody else has jackhammers. But they don't have experience. They can jackhammer all day long, make a lot of destruction, make a lot of noise. But until they know how to find that vein of gold, then I'm still going to come out ahead. Anyhow, I think that's enough of me jabbering for the day. So I'm going to go ahead and get back to actually working and let you get on with your day. Cheers.